collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up this week, to mark International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, the University of Cyprus hosted an event that revealed the latest findings of an opinion poll on the perceptions of Cypriots about refugees and asylum seekers, which it seems are often shaped by the way these issues are presented in certain sections of the media.
Because of this xenophobic media that dominates public discourse around this issue, because these kind of potential benefits are not given any attention, are not publicly discussed, I think most people see the whole issue as a threat rather than as an opportunity.
And a diverse team of Cypriots used the Transformative Scenarios process to map possible stories about what could happen in the future as regards the Cyprus problem.
We hope that it's going to be a tool to assist decision making, not just by the negotiators, but by all of society.
To mark the recent International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, which falls on March the 21st, the UNHCR in Cyprus, together with the Office of the Ombudsman and the University of Cyprus, hosted an event to raise awareness about racism and xenophobia, including hate speech and the impact on refugees and asylum seekers in Cyprus. One of the speakers was Professor of Social and Developmental Psychology at the university, Haris Psaltis. He was talking about the perceptions of Greek Cypriots about migrants, refugees and asylum seekers, and he joins us now. Haris, what first of all were you saying and how did that fit into the whole event?
Thank you very much, Rosie, for this invitation to talk about the recent findings of the University Center for Field Studies of the University of Cyprus. This was a representative sample survey that we have undertaken for UNHCR Cyprus so that we could explore the views of Greek Cypriots about immigrants, refugees and asylum seekers. Mostly the findings of this research have to do with the way people understand refugees, what comes to mind, for example, when they hear the word refugee, when they hear the word asylum seeker, when they hear the word immigrant. So first immediate reactions, representations, what comes to mind. And from that something interesting came out, which was that many people confuse these terms. So there's not really a lot of information about the similarities and differences between these terms. The second one was that people in Cyprus, especially the Greek Cypriot community, have, I would say, a rather favorable view of refugees as it relates to the events of 1974 and the experience of many Greek Cypriots of being internally displaced. So in that sense, that particular category of refugees, I would say for Greek Cypriots is a special category with usually, bringing up thoughts of empathy and suffering, but it is not the same with asylum seekers, because asylum seekers seem to be related in the minds of Greek Cypriots with people who want to manipulate the system, who want to come here and get benefits. There is no recognition usually of the urgency that bring people to come to ask for asylum in Cyprus. So in that sense, we're talking about different representations between these two categories. The first one, refugees, being rather favorable, but the other one rather unfavorable.
Which is strange, is it not? Because in order to become a refugee, first you have to be an asylum seeker.
That's exactly the reason I mentioned from the beginning, that there's actually a big confusion between these terms. So many people, about one third actually said openly, I don't know the differences between these two terms or the similarities. But then those who thought that they actually knew the definitions, most of them did not. So yeah, I mean, that goes to show that there is definitely a need from NGOs and the government to inform people, first of all, about these terms.
The other thing that strikes me is that the refugees that you mentioned in Cyprus, most of them were internally displaced. And that's a very big difference from those who actually fled Cyprus and went abroad, many of whom stayed abroad. So initially were also asylum seekers, now are either refugees or even citizens of the country that they fled to. Are people aware of the huge, I would say, emotional impact, not just of being displaced within your country, but of having to travel abroad to a country where possibly you don't speak the language, almost certainly. If you're coming from a third country to Cyprus, you don't speak Greek. So it's an enormous difference.
Yeah, well, that's a very good observation, Rosie, because usually when we refer to people who even left in 74, for example, and then went to live in London, we tend to think of them as, people who emigrated abroad and, they went to make their own life. But actually, we don't think of them as refugees because if they left in 74 due to the events of 74, clearly they are refugees. And in that sense, that would also help. If there was this recognition, it would actually help also, I think, many of us here in Cyprus to better relate to the experience of people who have to leave their country for a better future under dire circumstances.
And let's talk about that better future, because, as I said, so many of them actually stayed in either Australia, South Africa, UK, wherever they happened to go to, and made better lives for themselves. And that's something that we here in Cyprus seem to resent when foreigners come here.
Well, actually, yeah, because many people, and we found this from research, somehow relate people coming here in Cyprus with the threat framework. So, like, they are here to take our jobs, they will change our culture or our identity and things like that. And unfortunately, we see that in the majority of the people. I mean, I also have some percentages here, in case you want to give you some percentage. About 60% have negative views about the impact of immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers on economy. And about 55% have negative views in terms of thinking that, people who come here undermine the cultural life of Cyprus. So that's there. And the other interesting component of this research is that it was the second research that we completed for UNHCR with similar questions. The previous one was undertaken in 2018, and that sense we have comparative data. And when you compare the situation in 2018 with the situation in 2022, which is when we collected the data at the end of 2022, you find a significant worsening of the public opinion about this group of people. And that's clear, and one might wonder why this is happening, but I think the answer to this is that the political discourse of securitization from the previous government really led to this worsening of the situation. And because we have comparative data from other research, comparative like European Social Survey, for example, which will come out very soon, I'm sure we will see the consequences of this xenophobic climate that was cultivated also in that research. That will be international news, because I suspect Cyprus will be in the top 3 European countries in terms of xenophobic attitudes.
Along with the likes of Hungary, I suppose.
I think the other ones will be Hungary and Serbia and Poland, probably.
It's very worrying because it sort of suggests to me that what I thought was a very intelligent population here in Cyprus, don't keep abreast of events in other parts of the world. I mean, if you look back to the first huge wave of immigration and Germany's response under Angela Merkel, that was she knew that they needed more workers in Germany to maintain not only the workforce, but the social insurance payments, to maintain the pension system, for example. And we don't even seem to conflate those things here.
Yeah, I mean, from this research, we see that about 1/4 of the population has this more humanistic approach to the issue, and which wants to support not only in a philanthropic way, I mean, by donating food, clothes, and things like that, but also to actively support integration measures. And, 1/4 of the population might be a minority on the one hand, but it's still a significant percentage, and it's related with the educational background. I mean, the higher the educational background, the more likely you are to be in this quarter that has this humanitarian approach. In other countries, of course, it's much more, and that's why I referred to earlier to the European social survey findings. So, I mean, that's a valid question and an interesting one. Why would generally educated citizens would not have a much more positive attitude as one would expect from their educational background? I think the major reason, Rosie, for this is because of the role of media in Cyprus. I think we have that most of the TV channels, so I'm not talking about radio now, I think most of the TV channels in Cyprus follow a rather xenophobic discourse.
Well, it makes for better pictures and it's got punchier headlines, hasn't it? But I'm not talking about the humanitarian aspect as much as the win-win situation that it could be for everybody in Cyprus.
Yeah, I mean, the example you gave of Angela Merkel's argument about helping the economy are very valid, and this is the reality, but we see from research that it's only espoused by 1/4 of the population. So somehow in Cyprus, because of this xenophobic media that dominates public discourse around this issue, because these kind of potential benefits are not given any attention, are not publicly discussed, I think most people see the whole issue as a threat rather than as an opportunity.
What's to be done, Harris? I mean, I'm assuming that, like me, you feel that we're missing out, in a sense, on an opportunity to improve things not only for the refugees, but for our economy and, indeed, as we said earlier, for future pensioners.
Yeah, I mean, I was having a discussion recently with some people in an NGO in Cyprus helping immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, and what they told me, I mean, it's a well-known fact, for example, that we have a problem finding nurses in Cyprus, for example. I mean, why not train people who are here to take up jobs that people do not seem to want to take up? And in that sense, help each other. We know more generally that the demographics of the European Union are not very, very well in terms of having an aging population. So obviously we do need the younger generation of people who come to Cyprus from other countries to be more integrated. And that was one of the main findings of our research, was that in the last 5 years, any discussion of integration has been vanishing from the public sphere. Just to give you an example, as the University Center of Field Studies here in the University of Cyprus, we helped in the creation of a new national plan for integration. And that was a European project, and we had people coming here in the university discussing in different focus groups about the issue of integration from NGOs, refugees themselves, some government departments that deal with the issue of migration and asylum, etc. And I think there was a very nice plan that was prepared, by many contributions, the result of many contributions, and it was proposed to the previous Minister of Interior, who rejected the plan, and he said, this doesn't go along with my policies, which is this new securitization approach, and the plan was never implemented. So we're really looking forward to a possible change with the new government, that maybe they could implement that national plan for integration. Let's see.
Well, let's see indeed, because the other thing is that we've heard for years that people who have qualifications and end up on our shores because they've had to flee, Syria or somewhere else, they may be doctors, they may be nurses, they may be university professors, and they're only allowed to work in the agricultural sector or in kitchens, for example.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, that's a terrible waste, isn't it?
I would think so.
Did the event the other day come up with any ideas, apart from the implementation you've just been talking about of this plan, as to what else should or could be done to try and improve the situation here?
There were many suggestions about the role of education, about the role of the media and the need for critical media literacy, because many people came out, they trusted a lot what they saw on the news, and what was presented to them, but they didn't take a more actively critical stance in many of what they hear. So many people were misinformed, for example, thinking that asylum seekers get thousands of benefits every month, so misinformation about benefits, misinformation about the amount contributed by the Republic of Cyprus in European integration projects. So all this tells us that many people should train themselves somehow to be much more critical about what they hear on the media.
Media literacy, it's something that's sadly very lacking here in Cyprus. What a shame. Well, and as a journalist, I find that very depressing, as a matter of fact. Haris, it's been a pleasure talking to you once again, and let's see whether or not perhaps a change in media literacy, if not in the way the media present so many of these issues, will bring about a change in our perceptions about migrants, refugees and asylum seekers. Many thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Rosie. And let me just say that, people who want to read the whole report, they can find it on the webpage of UNHCR Cyprus.
Brilliant. That is Haris Psaltis, who is Professor of Social and Developmental Psychology at the University of Cyprus.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
We're going to talk now about a new initiative that has to do with the Cyprus problem. You can go to www.cyprusfutures.org to find out more, but to tell us all about it is one of the team that's working on this new initiative. He is Alexandros Lordos, a lecturer in psychology at the University of Cyprus. So, Alexandros, start off by telling us the idea behind this. We've had so many initiatives hoping to do something about solving our Cyprus problem, but this takes a different approach, I think.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me to discuss this with your audience today. What we try to do with the Transformative Scenarios process for Cyprus, I think this is really the full name of the initiative, is not to focus on promoting any specific type of solution, but rather create an opportunity for everyone involved to reflect on what are the possibilities going forward, what are the scenarios about how things might evolve in Cyprus, whether these are in ways we like or ways we don't like, and use that future-oriented perspective, if you like, that landscape of potential futures, in order to reflect on what decisions we could make today in order to ensure that we are on trajectories that we actually want to be on.
The fact that you, in a sense, allow, even encourage people to disagree with some of these scenarios, presumably gives you a more rounded picture of what most people want. But who is actually inputting into this?
So we were a group of 36 Cypriots, Greek Cypriots, Turkish Cypriots, Armenians, Maronites, who worked on this over a period of 1 year. We got together. I think each of us spent a total of about 15 days working on this. We come from different disciplines and specializations: law, politics, psychology, education, business, and various others. So we were each bringing our own perspectives. We are not all scientists. Most people who participated in the initiatives were just people who are working on, have their own specific perspective on what is happening in Cyprus today. And we tried to deliberate on what we, that specific group of 36 people, thought were plausible futures for Cyprus. We tried to stay away from what we thought was not plausible, i.e. scenarios that maybe people are talking about but don't really, that at least we didn't think have a chance of actually becoming reality over the span of the next 10 or 15 years. And we also tried not to be overly influenced by the scenarios that we particularly were fond of. We were trying to be as objective as possible. Of course, another group of 36 people might come up with different scenarios that they think are plausible. And of course, everyone is welcome to reflect on the scenarios, either to validate whether they believe that the four that we came up with are indeed the most plausible ones, suggest alternative scenarios, and if they agree with the scenarios that we suggested, to start reflecting on what that means for decisions we need to make today.
Well, how could this play into the approach of negotiators in the Cyprus process?
Yes, we do hope that the negotiators will find what we came up with useful. There was quite a strong emphasis on discussing, the pivot of the scenarios was on what will actually happen with the peace process. So to get into the substance of the scenarios and what is distinct about each one of them, there is one scenario in which the peace process just goes round and round in circles, doesn't really conclude, but doesn't really fall apart either. So good officer stays. We keep on a low-grade process going. The negotiators meet every so often. Maybe there's a high-level meeting in Switzerland somewhere, but it doesn't lead anywhere. So we thought that this is one plausible scenario for the negotiators.
Well, it certainly is one that's been playing out for the last 50 years here.
Exactly. Usually the most accurate prediction for the future is that it will be a continuation of the past. Though that doesn't necessarily need to be so. Sometimes we have the fallacy of expecting continuation of something, and sometimes systems do transition. Sometimes we do have sharp edges where history takes a very different course. Just to give an example of what I just said, if you asked anyone in January of last year whether they thought a large-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia was likely, almost no one would have agreed at that time, because it was such a sharp deviation from everything we knew about what happens in modern history. So we should expect, let's expect that it's definitely plausible that what is now happening will continue, but we shouldn't also say that it will definitely continue. We should be open that something else might happen and there may be a radical shift in what is going on.
Well, the nearest thing that could happen is a change of leadership in Turkey with elections coming up.
Yes, and we were reflecting on that in our scenario team. We did this in 2022, so it was also before the elections in the Republic of Cyprus as well. So we were reflecting that the elections in the Republic of Cyprus and in Turkey are going to be pivotal events that are going to create a new context in which decisions will be made. There's going to be a fork in the road after the elections in Turkey, and I think everyone is aware of that. So what we try to do with the scenarios is outline where those different forks might lead us. So yes, one fork in the road is that it's going to be business as usual regarding the peace process. Another fork in the road would be a deterioration, which would look, if we get into the deterioration fork, the first symptom of that will probably be disbanding of UN good offices. If it becomes obvious after the Turkish elections that there's not going to be any negotiations in the UN agreed framework, at some point we thought that a plausible scenario might be that good offices might be disbanded, and then each side will go their own separate ways. We call that the my way scenario, as opposed to the no way scenario, which is just going around in circles. So in the my way scenario, each community would just focus on promoting its own political interests through diplomatic, political means mostly, a very strong emphasis by the Turkish Cypriots on their international recognition with the support of Turkey, maybe succeeding in achieving some recognition from some countries that are closely allied to Turkey, and that would in turn lead to a sharp reaction by the Republic of Cyprus in collaboration with the European Union, which would ultimately undermine the standard of living of Turkish Cypriots. Because ultimately what the scenario team came up with was that in this context, the conflict dynamics, the political conflict dynamics, would ultimately hurt the ordinary Turkish Cypriot on the street. And of course, it would also have negative repercussions for Greek Cypriots, because part of this conflict dynamics might be, for instance, the opening of Varosha under this scenario in a way that really favors developers from Turkey rather than the original dispossessed owners. So it would really be a scenario where everyone loses.
Okay, we have to wrap this up shortly, but this transformative scenarios approach, I think, was developed, wasn't it, in South Africa? And it has been used in many other countries like Colombia, Guatemala, Ethiopia. Well, Israel, Palestine, they're a bit like us, aren't they, going round in circles? But many other countries. How do you think that this can be a tool, if you like, for the Cyprus solution?
Yeah. So yes, to answer that question, I have to briefly refer to the other two scenarios, and I'll be very brief. So we had two status quo scenarios, the ones that I have just mentioned, but then we thought that other two scenarios were plausible that would be leading to a federal settlement. One would be a top-down solution, which is really negotiated by closed doors, using mostly international experts, and ultimately leading to a settlement that would be fragile because it wouldn't be sufficiently owned and there wouldn't be sufficient attention to how the whole system is going to work together. We call that the peace under pressure scenario, while the final scenario, which we call the resilient peace scenario, would involve a more cross-sectoral approach, more Cypriot owned, not in the sense of just high level, but more socially owned peace process that would emphasize rebuilding the social contract and having resilient institutions and resilient communities across the island. So how might this be useful, to answer your question? By bringing those scenarios in front of the negotiators and, of course, everyone else in society, we hope that they will use them to critically reflect on how decisions they make today would lead to one or the other scenario. For instance, if now there is an agreement to restart the peace process, but that peace process is going to be closed off from the public and will only focus on some core hard issues like before, and not really look at issues like education and social cohesion, just to give two examples, not really engaging with displaced persons, that would probably lead us into that peace under pressure scenario that would lead to a fragile federation, if at all. If, in contrast, the decision is made to be more inclusive, to set up some kind of consultative assemblies for citizens and to start a multi-track process where multiple topics are being addressed simultaneously, that's more likely to lead to a resilient peace scenario. So we hope that it's going to be a tool to assist decision-making, not just by the negotiators, but by all of society.
Well, people can find out about all these scenarios on that website I mentioned at the beginning, cyprusfutures.org. Is that open for people to actually post comments and so on, or is it just for them to reflect on?
I think that I believe the website is just a resource website where people can download the various reports and they can read everything. Everything we produce is there. We will also be having some media links there. There are also links to social media pages where people can share their thoughts.
Okay, Alexandros, a pleasure talking to you. Let's hope that something comes of this finally. And that is Alexandros Lordos, lecturer in psychology at the University of Cyprus, talking there about the methodology and the scenarios that came up from the Cyprus Transformative Scenarios process. It's all on cyprusfutures.org. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.